it deserves worse. Hey y'all, my name is Nat. I hope you're having a terrific day today, and for this video, we are going to be doing an author taste test of 𝗖cie Harrow. Alright, before we get into anything bookish, make sure to hit like and subscribe down below, as well as tell me in the comments, have you read any of this author's works? Do they work for you, or do they not? If you're new to this series, when it comes to an author, I usually give them 2 chances, and if both of those go bad, that's it. I'm not reading anything else from you. So sorry, that's a shame. For an author to qualify for one of my author taste tests, I need to have more than 2 of their books on my TBR. So this way, you know, if I don't like those 2 books, I just knocked off however many other books I was interested in reading by them. But it also means if I love both those books, wow, I really need to prioritizing everything else in their backlist. Like I said, this time around, we are going to be focusing on 𝗖cie Harrow, who is a fantastical author that I do think tends to have some like historical elements in her stories, but she also has a good few fairy tale retellings. First up was Starling House, and this is their most recent release. The cover is definitely what attracted my eye, but it was also available from Book of the Month, so I figured, hey, why not? I'll take the jump and try this out. We are following our main character of Opal, who lives in this very small town in Kentucky. She is doing everything she can to get enough money to help send her little brother to a really nice private school, which will hopefully help him get into a really good college. Ends up taking this job at the mysterious Starling House as a maid. But this house has a reputation, kind of considered haunted. Nobody really knows who owns the house, but her favorite story from childhood was written by a previous tenant of Starling House. So not only does this job give her the opportunity to make some extra cash, it also gives her the opportunity to try and snoop around and find out as much as she can about Starling House, uncover maybe more about her favorite mysterious author. I do love books about books, so I'm excited for that element of the story. Gothic, creepy house. Cannot wait for the vibes there. The other one I decided to go with was the easier one I could get from my library, and that is 10,000 Doors of January. I've heard a lot of positive things about this one. I just don't really know what it's actually about. Wow, this summary is actually very unhelpful. We're following this young woman of January who is a ward to this really rich man that owns a lot of unusual curiosities and is almost building his own museum in his house. January being almost considered one of those curiosities. However, one day she finds this wonderful book, and slowly a story begins to unfold that she could never have predicted. I do love the book element. Curiosities aspect does have me intrigued, but that's literally all I know. Hey y'all, we are updating from my office. Josh is currently taking a nap, so I'm trying to be a little bit quiet. But hi, I have hit the halfway point into Starling House. And if I'm being completely honest, this was very close to losing me. I almost put it down because it is so slow, which is not necessarily an issue for me a lot of the time, but in slow stories, and particularly Gothic stories, which is what I think Harrow is shooting for, I need to care about the characters. Characters have to win me over for me to stay invested. And thus far, they just feel fine. Particularly, we have our main character, Opal, who has had a really rough life, but she's constantly kind of just pushing down all of that crap so that she can try and make the best of her situation, not always in the most legal of ways. Her main focus is really just on taking care of her little brother and hopefully try to get him out of their small town. She's trying to get him into this private school because he's really smart. I do keep getting irritated by the fact that we are told Opal and her brother Jasper have a very close relationship. We've seen in little moments between them that clearly they're siblings, like they get along really well, they understand each other, they obviously like still fight. It's so irritating to me that there's so much showcase to us that they have a really close relationship and that Jasper understands the situation they are in. He's not blind to it. For some freaking reason, Opal is just constantly lying to him and giving him half-truths, which is so frustrating. It's grating on my nerves, and I can predict issues that are going to happen and some that have actually happened already because she just won't be honest with him. Opal always feels the need to lie to people about everything. I don't know, it just feels so try-hardy. Some of the situations where she lies just feel really unnecessary. Like, just be honest. Like, being truthful would be more shocking at times than to lie. Opal isn't like the most likable character. I don't particularly love her. I don't hate her either, but like that element alone is driving me up a wall. On the opposite side, we also have our main character, Arthur, who is the warden of Starling House, and He's very socially awkward, he is curmudgeonly, and I'm actually far more interested in him and invested in his storyline. There are so many secrets kept around him that I want to know. When we are in Opal's perspective, it is written in first person, but in Arthur's perspective, is actually written in third person, and this is that I wish those were flipped. Arthur agrees to let Opal be the housekeeper at Starling House. Arthur is hoping that allowing Opal into the house will terrify her and she'll finally leave and never come back, but rather that's kind of worked against him. The other thing that I'm not a big fan of is there are these growing emotions between the two of them that showcase their longing for companionship that they are finding in the other person, but I'm not convinced by it at all. It more just seems like they're each lonely and this single person has showed them an ounce of kindness and they're clinging to that, seeing it as romance, which I don't feel convinced by the romance. That's how I'm reading it, is more so they're just, you know, happy somebody's actually being nice. Actually talking about positives I'm having with this. The writing is fantastic. It is beautiful. I will give Harrow this. She has built the setting wonderfully. There are small town vibes, there's the gothic house, and those things culminate into this very eerie atmosphere that's really enveloping. The mist that overtakes the town is just constantly like there. It's always in my brain whenever I'm picturing the story. It seems like Harrow was going for like sort of a gothic horror feel in a lot of the descriptions, in the atmosphere that's being set up. Honestly, this is coming across mostly fantastical, like a little unsettling, but fantastical, not really horror. However, now that I've hit events in the plot that are really leaning into that fantastical element, I'm actually so much more interested. I'm way more intrigued now than I have been for probably the last 100 pages. So I feel like if she keeps leaning on the fantastical elements, this will work well for me. If she keeps trying to push the horror thing, I don't know, it just doesn't really fit with everything else in the story. However, if she keeps trying to lean into the horror thing, I could see that starting to bug me. Right now, estimated rating, 3.5 stars. I don't know, I'm very up and down with this whenever I've been reading it. I'm hoping now that things are actually intriguing me. Whenever I keep reading, it'll keep me invested and I'll blast through this last 150, but I don't know. I don't think this is gonna be the 5 stars I was hoping it would be. So I finished out Starling House. You know how I mentioned in my last update that this book was losing me? I should have listened and focused on the fact that this was losing me and just put it down. I think I would have been better off DNFing it. Starting at the top, I just never cared about these characters. Arthur was okay. Opal constantly drove me insane. Harrow writes Opal to be an unlikable character, but really the thing that just drove me insane about her the most was the fact that she's constantly lying to people she cares about. She's withholding truth, she's not being honest, and often it doesn't even really make sense for why she's doing that. This book could have been 100 pages shorter if all characters across the board had just been honest with the people they cared about, but namely Opal. The fact that there was nothing else Harrow could come up with to drive the story apart from Opal constantly lying, I don't know, that just feels like lazy writing to me. It also made certain aspects of the plot insanely predictable. It was one specific scene that I could see coming from a mile away, and once it finally happens, like, it didn't feel cathartic. I wasn't happy that they were finally being honest. I was just irritated that it had taken this long for these two people who were supposed to love each other to finally have an adult conversation. I also was just never sold on the romance between Opal and Arthur. Rather, it felt like each of these people found someone who was similar in age, romantically available, and slightly nice to them, then clung to that to mean romantic interest. There was tension between them. I don't think there was ever chemistry. I really was not convinced by the development of their relationship to have hit romance. Then there are like 3 separate scenes that have this exact same argument between Arthur and Opal that was so dumb. The first time it was like, okay, I kind of get what's happening. The second time it was just, I don't understand why this perfectly mirrors the previous time, you know, talk it out. And then the third time, I was so over it. I was ready for them to just confess their feelings to each other and be done with it. Tying back to the fact that a lot of the plot progresses because of characters not being honest. There's also a villain character who progresses the story forward. And yet when we hit the climax, that character is completely inconsequential. They do not matter. They're literally tossed off the board that quickly. What was the point of them then? I don't get it. Well, I did like the writing in this book. It is very atmospheric. Felt like it was trying to be gothic in the first half, but it lost that in the latter half of the story. What I really didn't understand in the writing style was the sort of setup we're given, where it feels like somebody else is telling us Opal's story, because we have these footnotes and then the epilogue is from an external narrator. It's a slow moving book. It is trying to be a gothic story, but the climax is supposed to be fast paced. However, with the writing style, it just doesn't work. This is one of the few times where my co-pilot told me a rating and I was like, no, this book was worse than that. It deserves worse. This came out to 2.5 stars for me. I'm really sorry if somebody else loved this, but it was not it. I love beautiful writing. I do. But I do need a little bit more than that. This book actively makes me mad for what happened with the plot. This could have been a novella. So on that note, here's hoping the next book goes better. Hello, my friends. So I have hit the halfway point into the 10,000 drawers of January. I'm not gonna lie, I have already kind of considered DNFing this. But I'm not going to. I'm gonna keep reading. I am a little intrigued, a little bit. Obviously, after Starling House, I was nervous to go into this one. And unfortunately, I do think some of the issues I'm having here are similar to what I was having with Starling House, and is making me think that yes, Harrow's writing style is just probably not for me. And the irony in that is elements of this should work for me. They should work so well, but they just aren't. So first off, the setup of this book is pretty cool, following this young woman who is raised by her father's employer and is learning about the magic indoors, writing herself. That's pretty unclear, honestly, and kind of like a issue I'm having with this is I'm not understanding, what am I supposed to be taking from this? Yes, obviously it could be a combination of all three, but it just doesn't feel like that has been well done. And that questioning feeling I have is pretty on point for what I feel in a lot of this book. There will be something that is presented that will intrigue me, but then there's an extra layer added to it or an extra layer pulled back to reveal something new. And then it confuses me and I'm left wondering, do I actually like this? Another thing that I tend to really enjoy is a book within a book setup that this does have, but it hasn't really won me over here, and I think it's because, first off, I don't think the excerpts of the other book are woven into the story happening here very well. I was going back and forth wondering, like, how do the events of this book actually align with what's going on and the external plot? That finally was revealed, though, just shy of the halfway point, and I have mixed feelings about it. There are, once again, same two Starling House footnotes, which I just don't feel like are necessary, honestly. It feels like an unneeded thing to add page time and kind of just make the book more unique, but it doesn't really need it. Once that reveal took place, connecting the events from the internal book and the external book, this is a copy of Erin Morgenstern's The Starless Sea. And I can't unsee that comparison now. There are certain elements of that connection that do make me like this book. The writing itself is very lyrical. I do believe Harrow can really transport you into the atmosphere incredibly well. As far as writing of the plot and also the character, not loving it. So let's talk about the main character, January. She's very frustrating. And I can admit part of that is probably due to the fact that January is a mixed woman living in this time period and society where you expect her to be treated with racism and sexism. That automatically always raises my hackles and prepares me for being pissed off. But then on top of that, January is just so incredibly dumb. She's the only character with any depth also, and that's really not by much. She has this very strenuous relationship with her father that is so irritating to me because she clearly still loves him very much and is so desperate for time and his attention, but we're not shown that in a way that makes sense. There is a nod towards romance in both the internal book as well as the external book, and for both of them, they're incredibly underdeveloped, just based on nothing. So for right now, this is a book that I am reading. I'm feeling like this is probably going to be very similar rating to Starling House. Should I probably DNF this? Yes. Am I going to? No. And it's partially because I am reading this for a challenge, but also because I want to give you guys an actual review for this video and decide whether or not I can write off 𝗖cie 𝗁𝗁 or not. Hey guys, so I finished out 10,000 Doors of January, and if I am being completely honest, I type up my reviews when I hit the halfway point of the book, and then I'll alter them whenever I finish out a book, and I barely altered this review because my feelings really did not change very much. The only bit that changed between the halfway point and now is that I hated the main character January more. She has no survival skills. I'm genuinely curious if she's allergic to making a plan. As I said before, I think she's the only character in the story that actually has a bit of depth, but that doesn't mean the depth there makes me like her. I still don't really get why she had such strong positive feelings towards her father. As the plot itself continued, I really was having a hard time understanding how she still had such positive feelings towards her caretaker, her father's employer. She's just constantly so naive. Like I said before, there was a romance that was taking place, and I still think it was incredibly underdeveloped, though I will admit there were a few moments between the two that was very cute. One or two lines that I thought were very romantic. That's something I do want to say. I think Harrow is a good writer. I just don't think these books are for me because the characters in both of them have driven me insane, and the plots are just so slow moving that it's really hard for me to get invested into them. I don't think Harrow's writing hits on the mark enough for me to ignore the problems I have in other parts of the story. As I said, plot so slow moving, it took forever to really go anywhere. I think the use of magic was like woefully uninspired. She learns at some point that there's a limit to how much magic she can exude, not only due to the limits of magic, but also due to the toll it takes on her body. But when needed, it's like those limits just disappear. And so it just felt like such a plot convenience, and it was like, why have the limits then? So yeah, this is a book that I read. I just would rather read The Starless Sea by Erin Morgenstern. I think she did it better. This was not it for me. And on this note, I have officially decided I'm not reading any more of 𝗖cie 𝗁𝗁, unfortunately. I have removed the rest of her work that I had on my TBR. Clearly, her writing does not work for me. If she works for you, I'm so happy. I'm so glad. So yeah, that is kind of the whole idea of these author taste test videos, is to find authors that I need to prioritize more of, or, you know, remove from my TBR completely. And Harrow falls in the latter. On that note, that is it for today, y'all. Thank you so much for coming to my channel. I really appreciate it. Make sure to hit like and subscribe down below. If you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave me a key emoji in the comments. I have all my socials as well as a few ways you can support me linked in the description. I come out with videos on Monday and Friday, but until then, I hope you continue to have a terrific day. Love you, bye!